Welcome back to another episode of the Isn't That Rich podcast. In September of 2023, Farmer State Bank hosted a half-day seminar called the Legacy Sessions, featuring 4 guest speakers who are expert in their industry, helping people build a lasting legacy for themselves. We recognize how important the information they gave us was to not only the people attending this event, but to our listeners as well. So we wanted to give you the opportunity to hear what they had to say. So for the next 4 weeks, we'll be releasing the Legacy Sessions on our Isn't That Rich podcast. It is my honor to introduce our first presenter for today, Adam Lawler.
Adam is a prominent attorney and entrepreneur from right here in Marion, Illinois. After completing his legal education from the esteemed St. Louis University School of Law in 2004, he returned to Marion to begin his legal career, and since then he's become the leading figure of the legal industry. He is the founder of Lawler Brown Law Firm, where he currently serves as managing partner.
As a bank deeply rooted in supporting our community and its values, we believe Adam's insight on succession planning will be immensely valuable for individuals, families, and businesses looking to secure their legacies here today. Please join me in welcoming Adam Lawler.
My name is Adam Lawler. I'm a local guy. I grew up right here in Marion, Illinois, graduating high school back in 1996. Yeah, we do have a 96 in the crowd. Melissa's out there somewhere. After graduating high school, I attended SIU for undergrad before ending up in St. Louis for law school. During law school, I had the opportunity to marry my high school sweetheart, Sarah. She's out in the audience somewhere. At least she said she was going to attend. Oh, there she is right there. Sarah and I are proud parents to 4 little ones. I don't know if they're little anymore, but they go all the way from 3rd grade to sophomore in high school. So we have a busy life at home, but we enjoy the heck out of it. When I moved back to Southern Illinois back in 2004, I had the wonderful opportunity to work with Ron Osman. Ron's a great local attorney where I spent 5 years. That was very instrumental for me in gaining valuable experience in many areas of law. In 2009, I had the opportunity and made the decision to go out on my own, starting my own law firm right down the road. I was later joined by my younger brother, David, and then followed by Nick Brown, 3 other attorneys, Andy Flynn, Zach Walston, and Evan Taylor. It's just really hard to believe that I'm in the start of my 20th year of practice. And while our firm handles a wide range of practice areas, I spend the majority of my time in banking, real estate, and business law. So I'm really honored to have been asked by Farmer State Bank to share a few minutes to dive into business practice that I really enjoy. Full disclosure, I'm a little bit nervous about it because I've had Sarah sit through it twice. And each time at the end, I was like, Sarah, how did I do? And she's like, man, it's kind of boring, Adam. So I promise I'm going to try to not make it boring. As the 3rd of 6 boys, I kind of had to rely on humor to stand out among them. They were 5 kind of psycho brothers. We won't get into those stories. But so I use humor, but I'm not sure how the humor in business succession planning will work. So that said, like they said at the beginning, if any of the topics we cover, you think, Adam, I just don't understand. When I move over to the couch with Jill and Jared, hopefully I can flesh out some of those items. My goal for the day is to hit on 5 items. And keep in mind, in this window, it's going to be hard to dive in deep, but my goal is that we plant some seeds for the business owners out there to understand what is business succession planning. Why is business succession planning important? When should you start thinking about it? Who needs to be at the table when you start those discussions? And how practically does it all come together? So with that said, let's talk about what is business succession planning. Broad picture or big picture, it's normally when a business owner starts to orchestrate a plan that is aimed at instructing, coaching, and readying the eager members of the succeeding generation or the existing team to assume the ownership, leadership, and operational responsibilities within his or her business. Practically, that requires an extensive amount of documents. So there's normally a collection of documents that are put together based upon those plans and desires that are strategically designed to secure the long-term viability of that business during the transfer of ownership from one generation to the next or from one owner to another co-owner. What all business succession plans have in common is that each one is unique. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to the transfer and ownership in control of a family business. However, what I see in my practice is that the questions that should be asked and considered are usually the same in each case. During my sit-downs with business clients, I find that one of the most difficult decisions that a business owner will make is choosing who's going to take over the reins of that company when the business owner or other key employee is no longer able to lead. We see that the no longer able to lead is sometimes due to death, disability, and retirement. In some cases, it's really hard to even get a business owner to focus on putting an estate plan in place, much less a succession plan to ensure the continuation of their company. What is the reason for this? Very often I see that business owners are so focused on running the day-to-day operations and maintaining the success of the company that this is one of those items that gets placed on the back burner. Some people are superstitious about putting that together, fearing that even talking or thinking about a succession plan will hasten the event that requires that plan to be put in action. This process also forces many business owners to face some difficult truths. Perhaps the business owner will need to come to terms with the fact that none of his or her children have the requisite skills or even the interest to step into the shoes. Or instead, that business owner might have to choose a successor among children who are fighting each other over that potential position. Sometimes the lack of that heir apparent within the family leads to other complicated questions that need to be answered. Should a non-family member run the company, at least temporarily? Should the company be sold? If so, to whom? And should it be sold during the business owner's lifetime or at death? In many cases, business owners don't even know where to start with all of these questions, with all of these issues, and with all of these ideas. Another unique challenge that we see in succession planning, business succession planning, is that normally there's two different groups that we're dealing with. We're dealing with the family, which consists of individuals who are owners. They can also be employees in the business, taking on a wide range of roles. Family can also be a part of the management team, or the family can be the outsiders. Individuals that have no say, no role, or no desire to be part of the company, whether because of mom or dad's choice or because of their life decisions. We also always have to bring into the fold the business itself. We know a business is normally a business just like many of you all have, which is a going concern that's been founded by one or more or small group of individuals that's focused primarily on generating a profit. Where we see the friction and where we really have to come together and put together ideas to deal with this is because it's always important to remember that the owners and managers of a family business may include people who are not family members at all. We see many non-family members brought into business because the business might need some capital or it might be talent, meaning that individual is a necessary addition to help the business run successfully. So whenever we first start our discussions and we're approaching that business succession planning, it's always important to assess where the company is at in its generational cycle. Is this a first generation company? If so, we normally see clearly defined leadership, CEOs and presidents and founders that have confidently operated the business and they don't have any fear of being unseated or taken out of control. As that passes down, we see different wrinkles that we often need to address. So we've talked about what is business succession planning, and just to recap, that is putting together documents in a plan to make sure that business can continue on. Next, we like to look at why. Why is it important to have a business succession plan? I'm sure for many of the business owners in the room, it's unlikely that you've spent so much of your life, so much of your time, so much of your blood, sweat, and tears building a business that you would envision that business might terminate at your death. I think quite the opposite. Many business owners view their business as part of their identity and their legacy and would prefer that it endure long after that owner has left the building. In many cases, we see that the business owner's ultimate goal is to ensure that family business continues from one generation to the next for as long as possible. Accordingly, I think we see that the goal of most business succession plans is to provide a framework and structure that gives the business that best possible chance of transforming the business into a truly sustainable legacy. We all know that is easier said than done. I'm sure many of you out there read the Wall Street Journal or see the statistics that come out on business. Our federal government through the SBA often puts out information on the success of businesses and how long they typically last. Here in the U.S. over the past few years, we see that only about 50% of U.S. businesses with employees make it more than 5 years. Only about 35% will survive 10 years or more. And if you want to look at what percentage will make it to 15 years or more, it's less than 25%. So the benefits of a good succession plan are that it's going to ensure the stability of the company's value by having a plan in place to make that orderly transition of ownership and management of the company. That good succession plan is going to avoid jeopardizing the company's competitive advantage in the marketplace. We see all too often a hiccup that happens. There is death, and then there is the uncertainty of, oh crap, who's in charge? Who is going to step up and take this role? When we have a good business succession plan in place, we help avoid that uncertainty. A good plan also provides a great foundation for future growth. It helps minimize that disruption from the estate taxes and generation skipping transfer taxes that can be hit. This includes the forced sale of the company that is sometimes needed to generate liquidity to pay those taxes. In the course of our probate practice, we see that quite often, that businesses that were successful in just running at, full speed ahead, all of a sudden are being sold for 30 and 40 cents on the dollar post-death because there's no plan, there's no heir apparent, there was no succession plan in place to figure out what is going to happen to that individual, whether death, disability, or they say, we're going to Mexico. It also, it provides that smooth transition because many of the owners out there, business owners, I'm sure in the audience, you lay in bed at night and think about the what if, the who's going to do it. So that plan provides that peace of mind in that smooth transition for the founder as they go into the next chapter of their life. As we all deal with the joy of families, some of us have 51-year-old brothers that still live at home and other items, but this helps preserve that family harmony because it sets forth some clear expectations and standards on what role or no role that family is going to play in the business. For many of our business owners, their biggest asset is their business. So a great succession plan provides that source of cash flow and employment, not only for themselves, but for the future generations. And like I said, that peace of mind, that to me is the most important because A great business succession plan not only provides that peace of mind to the owners, the key managers, but also to the team members, because in my opinion, not that all the details on valuation and how much it's going to be transferred for needs to be shared with the entire team, but communicating to the team that there's a plan in place is invaluable. For that team member to know that, hey, if something happens to David, are you in here? Okay, David's one of the founders. Yeah, I'll kill you off. If something happens to David on the way to work, we're going to be okay. I mean, you're valuable, but I'm just using it as an example. So communicating that to the team, I think, helps that team member become vested and know that they really have a place to continue to work and grow. So we've gone through the what, we've gone through the why. When is the right time to start that succession plan? I mean, in essence and in a word, right now. Succession planning may not be top of mind for the young individual that just got on LegalZoom and paid $75 and got their articles of organization for their new company. However, once that company is off the ground and all of a sudden you have an employee or two and you have some real cash flow coming in, I think it becomes clear that there's a real value in that company and potential for growth. It's not too early to start thinking about who would take over if that young founder or entrepreneur has an unexpected life event, whether incapacity, whether death, whatever. We see just like starting a new fitness or a new diet regimen, the most important step taken is the first. The act of crafting that business succession plan is a process that's going to require some contemplation, some thought, some discussion, some hard decision making, and regular revision to, as circumstances evolve and as the business change. Because perhaps that child that, looked like he or she was going to be the heir apparent, or that highlighted manager who showed that promise now has serious problems, or David's let him go to jail because of a guilty plea, that would affect their ability to lead. So a good succession plan, we can never do it in an afternoon. And it's never just placed in a drawer to never be looked at again, but it's a document that needs to be, I say at least annually, looked at to make sure that it's relevant. So start that process of thinking about it now. Many times, during the initial discussions that we have with clients, it might just be one of our attorneys and some of the owners as we talk, but as the plan really starts to get more evolved, the question often says, hey, Adam, who else do we need to bring in? I mean, so obviously we bring the owners in, we bring the managers in, the attorneys will be there, the accountants, and other key team members. Do you guys know who the most important one is? You're right, it's the accountants. They're the smartest and best one. Any attorney can write a document. Your accountants are the most important ones there. So if there's any accountants here, you're welcome. You are truly valuable. I'm not one of those attorneys that also carries a CPA license, so we rely heavily upon our accountants to take a look through the plans that are presented to us and the ideas for that accountant to look at and say, whoa, or that looks like a green light. As we get all of those individuals at the table, many of the items that we spend time talking through are management and ownership. First, we often look at and say, hey guys, in your business, what are the key management positions and who should hold them? Every outsider, we call them a non-family member, every outsider that's hired into a family business, and every family member who holds a management position has that potential to be that next generation of the business leadership. When we look at family members, we often ask the hard questions of the clients, and just to really push and say, hey, is that family member truly qualified to hold that position? If they do, do they even have the desire? Or are they out in the Peace Corps somewhere not wanting to take that active role? So that part to me is so important, because as we're talking about business succession and we're thinking about, the event we're here on today on making sure that continues on, the question and the identification of those key managers is going to be so important. We also, and again, I could go on for too long, as Sarah said during some of my presentations, as she was doing like the skip, I could go into a lot of the questions we ask about management on, well, hey, that one shows some potential. Can we train them? So, hey, we'll spend a lot of time talking about management, and we can spend even more time talking about ownership of that company as we are looking at getting that ownership to that next generation or that other owner. And sometimes when we're looking at if that ownership's going to pass down to family, then we talk through, who can or should own or control the voting stock in that company. Is it a family member that works in that company? Or do we sometimes talk about putting together a different business advisory committee that helps make those decisions that are going to be in the best interest of the company? We also, as we look at ownership, we look at many documents to see, hey, will the family members who work in the business be treated the same as those who do not? We'll talk more about this later on, but we often say, okay, hey, what do existing buy, sell, or cross-purchase agreements look like? A big equation, the big item that's always on the table too is, what does your estate planning look like? And what are your potential taxes? This is Evan. He's going to be talking next. I assure you in person, he's much better looking. He'll be way more cleaned up. Somebody modified his photo, but Evan will be a great resource and tool to help minimize that, because we want to make sure that the liquidity items that we see post-death, that we're going to have a plan in place, and that we have a strategy to deal with the impact of any estate taxes. As we move into, okay, Adam, we've talked about, what one is, why it's important, when do you do it? We next move into, okay, how practically does that happen? And we, as a team, as we're going through and spending a lot of time with our business owners, we have different checklists that we start with. And one of the first items we like to sit down and talk about is that history, that mission and value statement of your company. If you don't have one, that's where we send you home and encourage you to put one together, because a key starting point for that succession planning is identifying the values of the company and what its true mission is. Those values may have, started from the initial founders' values. Maybe they've evolved over time as a new generation has stepped in, or as Charlie stepped up as the 2017 CEO. But I think it's extremely important to memorialize the company's roots and history along with its mission and its values, because that's going to provide that valuable tool to which the current and those future generations are going to look and rely upon. As we look at, we look at putting together the how, we want to make sure that we have the vision and strategy that is memorialized into those documents to make sure that the governance, the operation, and the growth is on track. Because as the company's leadership team looks into the future, having a vision, goals, and strategic plan for how the company will grow over time, we see is so critical to securing that company's success. Integral to this plan is identifying the role, if any, that family is going to play in the managing and governing of that growth. A very important item that, again, in the business succession, the goal is to remove the ambiguity and to have really clear documents to help this company continue on. In one of those documents, and it might be in the form of a company policy, is going to be, how does the company identify and groom talent both within and outside of the family. It may be difficult or maybe even impossible to look beyond the first rung of the succession ladder. Tomorrow's leaders might not even be on the horizon, but a good succession plan is going to acknowledge that fact by implementing the process in the standards that we identify, we train, and we cultivate that next generation of leaders who may or may not be family members. Company policies, I can't speak too much about. Sarah again said, Adam, that is really boring. And all this might be boring, but I assure you that it's so important to spend that time if the goal is to ensure that this business is going to continue on, because the whole goal is to have that roadmap in place. Company policies, we always preach that every business should have policies in place that put those standards and parameters around a family member's employment in the company, as well as their ability to receive cash flow from the company. So those policies are going to address compensation, guidelines, code of conduct, all of those items, because what we find is it's so much easier to have those difficult conversations with family members whenever there's a clear set of standards, as opposed to saying, well, no, Uncle Joe just doesn't like me. No, it's not that. The company has in place a policy for your decision, to smoke some weed at lunch. That's not allowed. So having all of those policies in place are so much easier to be able to go back and say, this is the reason why. Also, as we look to the how, we always want to make sure that we are looking to ensure that the owner's estate plan mimics or mirrors the plan that we are putting in place for the business. The reason for that is our goal is to remove any ambiguity, because ambiguities or uncertainty between estate planning documents in those business documents leads to conflict. Conflict not only leads to tears, but it also can lead to litigation. So as we work with a business, and many times they might have already had some estate planning in place, we want to make sure that there is no confusion in regards to how their estate is being distributed and how we are putting together these business succession plans. So that's part of the analysis that we undertake as we review those estate planning documents to ensure just that. Another item that the accountants are so valuable is taking a really deep and hard look at the existing business financial picture. Because as we're looking at transferring this business from either one owner to another co-owner or the next generation, we want to see what assets are going to be available for the owner to keep, what assets are going to be transferred to that new group of owners. So the examination of the financial picture is a very important item. Finally, and I know I have it out of order on the slide, are buy-sell agreements. Buy-sell agreements are, I'm sure they're a term or a phrase that you've heard, but I can never stress how important properly crafted buy-sell agreements are. Oftentimes, the example I give, as I'm sitting with a few, John and let's say John and Steve have went out to form their own business. John and Steve have agreed to do business together, and they've invested a lot of time, a lot of their own money. And one of those items we want to make sure, in that we do this through a buy-sell agreement, is that if something happens to John, whether it's disability, whether it's death, or whether it's a desire to just leave that company and be done, we figured out, what do we do with John's share? In death, we have sometimes different funding options. Maybe there is life insurance in place to ensure that John's family can be paid for his interest, or we can figure out how to compensate John in the event of disability. How do we value John's interest in the event he says, I'm done with this company? So buy-sell agreements help put in place those parameters for when an owner leaves the company for whatever reason. I told David, whenever Dave and I joined teams, I said, hey, David, I agreed to be partners with you, but not with your wife. So, she couldn't, she's not a licensed attorney, so we're a little bit different. But in real world, I mean, that's a real thing, saying, because if there's not a buy-sell agreement in place and John passes, his 1/2 interest gets tied up into his estate. What if that estate needs certain liquidity and they have to take these steps to try to force the sale of the entire business to get that money over to an obligation that this estate has? So those sort of items and those sort of discussions need to be had. And again, we always throw out the death or disability. What about for cause? What if one of your owners, who's also an employee, just goes off the deep end and has to be removed? Well, we could figure out a way to terminate his employment. What do we do with that remaining interest that he or she has in the company? I always encourage that we define what happens to that and how. How do we value that? And I think up on maybe it's a previous slide, we talked about appraisals and valuation methods. There's too many to go into today, but in a buy-sell agreement, we look at the different valuation methods for purchasing or buying out that interest based upon the event that has happened. Sarah, was that too boring or is that too much? I nailed it, okay. So manages the transfer, handles challenges and addresses concerns. Obviously, as we talked about, a business owner and the importance of the business, obviously they want to make sure that if something happens to them, most business owners at least, want to make sure that there's still a way to continue to support their spouse and their heirs, and a buy-sell agreement does that. And it also, like we talked about at the beginning, in that communication with the team, it helps protect those other owners and protects the business and ultimately the employees and team members themselves. So buy-sell agreements are such a valuable tool. Sometimes, I won't get into all the nuances. I'll start talking about who's going to buy it, whether the company, but that's okay. Oh, maybe we'll still get to talk about it. So who's going to buy that interest back? Sometimes it's the company. You've probably heard that. Sometimes it's between owners. And sometimes when we see a buy-sell agreement that is dealing with the transfer or purchase of interest between owners, we'll sometimes see that identified as a cross-purchase agreement, a cross-purchase between or buying between shareholders or membership interest holders in an LLC. A big question that we run into is that funding. How is the non-departing owner going to be able to buy or acquire that interest back from the deceased or disabled? We will define not only the valuation, but how that is going to happen. Sometimes it's sold on terms. Sometimes the owner that is acquiring the interest is going to pay over a defined period of time. Sometimes they're obligated to go out and secure traditional financing to make sure that the estate or the departing owner gets their money in a lump sum. Like I mentioned earlier, sometimes in the event of death, it is done through life insurance. So there's many different ways that we look at acquiring those funds to pay off the owner that is leaving. Say it again. So guys, just to kind of wrap it up, I always say, so what is next? What do I do? I think every business owner in the room needs to, go home and just put the pencil to paper and just outline, what does your business truly need? Does it need to raise up new leaders? Does it need to train its existing team better? Does it need to think about 100 different issues? But start with just putting the pencil to paper and identifying. And as you do that, like we said earlier, a succession plan is not something that you can knock out in a day, a week, and many times you can't even do it in a month. But set your timeline or set your goal for having those initial documents in place. Once you have that, I say then the time is to start talking. I think I accidentally put in text boxes. Don't text about it. If that is the text icon, talk about it. Well, Adam, who do you talk to? Well, start talking to your other owners if they're there. Start talking to maybe some of your key management, some of your key leaders in the business if you think they're the ones that might jump and fill that role to ensure the viability and the continuation of the company. Maybe it's a conversation that you have with the attorneys. Maybe it's a conversation you have with the accountants. But what I hope that you take from today is just the need. I think it's one of those that all business owners know. I mean, Sarah and I, as we had young kids, we knew that we needed a trust in place for those kids in the event, God forbid, the plane goes down. We didn't do it for years because we got stumped on who do we choose to raise our kids if we're not around. The same thing in the business. Who are you going to choose to run that company if you're not around and not able to do it? So force yourself to have those hard conversations within and then with others. So I think that's about all that I have for today. Farmers, I really appreciate the amazing opportunity to be able to come down here and speak. I hope that it sparked some idea within you as a business owner on what your possibilities might be. And as I move over to the couch with Jill and Jared, please don't hesitate to raise your hand, ask a question. If you don't want to do it in the group forum, I'm going to stay around between sessions. Don't hesitate to come up and give me your question. So thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to talk.
I always love hearing what Adam Lawler has to say about succession planning, especially for business owners looking to leave their business to the next generation. And I can't wait to hear what Evan Taylor has to say in part 2 of our legacy sessions next week. Tune in next time. We'll see you then.
So Jill, where do we go from here?
Be sure to check out our show notes for this episode, and also be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.